but in Brazil. Unfortunately, it was a different dynamic that there is in Brazil, and is the unit economics were upside down. So after 2 years of pivoting and trying a lot of really fun stuff, we had to call it quits and gave back some money to the investors. And on my last venture, which was in the US, which was a marketplace, which was an end-to-end marketplace in real estate to try to really change how people were making the largest purchases we're doing in their lifetime. It's very interesting because the unit economics was there. We came out of the gate very fast. We had a great we had a great team
Okay.
and something that we should definitely touch on
Yeah, for
afterwards.
sure.
A great team on paper, uh, big traction right from the get go, and then we could no longer grow. We were growing 20%, 40%, 30% year over year, which didn't really warrant venture capital. And after 5 years of pivoting and trying a lot of different things, um, we realized we were going to call it, like, we're not going to change the game. This was not going to be
Mm,
a massive company, and we decided to, in accord with our investors, we decided to stop the company.
okay.
And since then, I'm right about to join a new company. It's very exciting, but
Nice.
it's it's on its way. So I cannot say which company, but if you follow me afterwards, you'll be able to see, like, maybe even next week.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, that's pretty cool.
but very fun. In the meantime, I have been a venture partner at a fund called FJ Labs, where I have overseen over 1,000 decks. I have personally invested in 7 of their fund, plus a few other fund, including the one Capital Factory now.
Oh, nice.
And I have angel invested directly into 40 plus companies. I would say that I have seen everything that is D2C, C2C, B2B, but I have a little bit more of an affinity for e-commerce and marketplaces, I would say,
Okay.
than anything else. Um, but through the time of analysis, I have invested in most most everything, and
Oliver,
that's
I'm
kind
sorry.
of it.
No, no, but is there any special industry that you're focused right now while investing or looking for opportunities?
So that kind of changed over time. I used to go and only invest in copycats around the world. So when you looked at companies that were successful in one country, very often it would be either the US or a large country like China, because they benefit from something that is very large, which means they have a vast population, which means that you can actually produce a niche product but still make it very big. I still remember when I saw an e-commerce for cowboy boots, which I thought would be tiny, and it was like a massive company.
Okay.
Um, and then you have a very big GDP per capita. When you combine the vast population and a rich population, this is massive. And very often, when you have a business model that works in the US, people are busy expanding in the US,
Mm,
as they should. It is a logical thing to do. If you have $5 million, you're very often better suited to conquer the American market, because you're going to go much less. You're not going to go as far if you use those $5 million in France or in Brazil, because simply the population is not as rich, and it's very often just simply much smaller.
correct.
And that's even forgetting about all of the hurdles in some countries where the taxes might be very different, or the employment and the people's skill set that you need might be very different. But what is very interesting is that if you are not the person who launched the US or in China, well, that model works. And the biggest risk you have in starting a company is the model, is a market product fit. And so you are de-risking it a little bit if you take a model that works somewhere and bring it somewhere else. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you pick the wrong model. Shoes for You, my third company, we picked the wrong model. Shoe Dazzle is not a big success. It looked like it was going to be a big success. It just
In
simply
paper,
wasn't.
like you mentioned,
But by
yeah.
then, but by then we had already been it. Now, my strategy has kind of shifted. My strategy is I simply am going in the way of the world. And the way of the world, now this has been very exacerbated by COVID, but this was already true um, prior to COVID, which is, do I think that people will hire throughout the world, or will they hire local? Well, given that there is a massive um, the skill seems to be pretty much the same everywhere, but there is a massive wage gap in different countries. It makes
Correct.
sense to have this kind of leverage. Actually, Omar is
Yeah,
exactly what you do.
symbiosis is doing that. Yeah.
Exactly. So people will hire more internationally. Okay, well, if you need to do this, that means that you need people with product management skills. You need HR people who are able to do this. So you can see a big trend with like Papaya Global,
Mm,
Remote, Deal, all of those guys. But remote work was clearly a trend that was happening, and therefore it was going to create an entire industry. Climate change is also something that is inevitable, like inevitable. I cannot say that word, but it's coming no matter what. Um, Winter or internal summer is coming, we'll say.
winter is coming,
And,
right?
yeah, and we know this for a fact.
Yeah.
Therefore, tons and tons of company are going to go and become built in this way. And what I like about this category, for example, both the remote work and the climate change, is that the company is going to grow, but their market is going to grow at the same time.
Hmm.
And so they're going to have this compounding effect where you're going to see some massive trailblazer. And even if the company is not as optimized, it won't matter as much because they're going to be carried by the trend. Other big trend that I see is that for the longest time there was a very vast inequality in healthcare and education, and I think this is good. There was a lot of very precursor Udemy, Coursera, a lot of those guys, but with the advent of telehealth and teleteaching, I think we're going to be seeing, and a lot of AI, and quite frankly,
Hmm.
better content on the internet, I think
Yeah.
that we're going to see a big democratization there and a very big overhaul of education, which should have been happening for a
Way.
hundred years,
Yeah.
and is not happening.
Way before.
But I really think we're going to get there. I think one of the things that I find super encouraging is a company called Baidu. Baidu, not the Chinese one, the one that is in, I may simply be mispronouncing it, but is the education program for kids
Okay.
from like I think 3-year old to 18-year old in India
Okay.
is the third most uh, is the biggest the third biggest valued company in India held privately. So it's basically it's the third biggest startup that is in India, and it's about education. And they've done it because the education in Mumbai and in Pondicherry and like all of like the
Chennai.
big
Yeah.
places did well, but everywhere else it was kind of like dragging foot, and so they kind of leapfrog in directly into this company,
Mm.
and they're just doing massive success. Which in turn, by the way, I think will bring on a lot more entrepreneurs, a lot more education, a lot of
Into
really
the
cool
space.
things.
Yeah.
And so, to make a very long story short, I now try to invest in things where I think this is going to be the trend. Um, like afterwards, I like right after this event, I'm actually going to be doing some mentoring, and one of the companies I'm mentoring is going to be an event company for weddings. Well, I don't actually think that's going to go into trend. I'm still going to do the mentoring. I'm going to help as much as I can, but it's very unlikely that I would invest in such a company because I'm like, if weddings are still as it would, I'm guessing weddings are just as much or as low as it was before. I don't think it's going to be a growing trend, for example.
Okay.
And doing big events, I think, is a dying trend. I think that people are going to go toward more personalized events, um, and so that's kind of the philosophy there. And that is just to say about the category. It's not to talk about where do you need to be, what are the unit economics, how far have you how much traction should you have had by then, and on and so forth. That all of this is a completely different, is very well defined as a very different conversation.
Right. Yeah, and I remember that you mentioned the exit potential, right? Also, that you as an investor, you look for that. Is it possible for a VC to exit or for an angel investor to exit this company at some point, or will you be stuck in that company forever, right?
Absolutely. So this is a very interesting mistake, a very common mistake that I see entrepreneurs do is that they tend to see VCs as money, and that's it. But the VCs are working through very clear dynamics over how they operate and how do they make money. And understanding those dynamics is very important in order to know how to pitch them. So I'm not going to go into very big details over how many like each partner needs to lead a deal and needs to be on X amount of board per years, etc. This is micro optimizing and quite frankly just too hard to trigger. I think what you need to understand is that when you're pitching a VC, you're not competing against your market or your competitors. You're competing against the other decks that they're receiving at the exact same time. They might be in different categories. They might be in different continent for all it matters. But are you the hottest deal that they got this week?
On the
And
table,
if
yeah.
the answer is no, well, then you're probably in trouble. Furthermore, most VCs make only a handful of investment per year. And so you need to make sure that you understand their thesis, because if you're not the hottest deal, there is, because man, fuck, it's fucking hard.
Yeah.
You need to be really in line with their thesis, and they need to love you.
Right.
And at different stages, those are different things that comes, but understanding those dynamics really change the games. Particularly through the mentoring, a lot of people are getting frustrated when I tell them like, "Hey, man, you just don't have enough traction. You're not going to be able to raise," which, by the way, fucking sucks for me to say. Like, I never like to deliver bad news,
Yeah.
but the reason I'm saying this is because I know what kind of traction other people are having, or what the VCs are getting at that stage. And if you're not competitive,
You
why
won't be
would the
able. Yeah.
VC put the money in? Because in his mind, and this is going to be very important, is that he's going to put money. His fund is going to last 10 years. He's going to invest in about 100 companies. Of those companies, at best, 50% are going to die immediately, zero return. Maybe 30% are going to bring back some form of money, equal or a little bit, 1x, 2x, 3x. And then at the very end, he's going to have a few companies who are going to be massive success, who are going to pay for all of the bullshit, and then make it, and then pay for the fund, and they can make their money. Which, by the way, if you don't know how funds make money, they don't put their own money. They have limited partner
LPs.
who invest in the
Yeah.
fund. There's fund manager who make 2% per year of the fund put over a course of 10 years, and then they have something called a carry, and the carry is only on the added values that they can bring. So if they raise $100 million, it's only once they bring $100 million plus in um, in valuation, in returns, that they're able to start making money
Money. Yeah.
themselves. And so they need to do deals that are big, that can be heavy, that have the potential to be heavy hitting. That also means that if your market size is tiny,
You won't
and
be able to.
you're not going to get a VC investment,
Yeah.
because it's never going to be able to pay for for if you are the big success and you're tiny, well, you're not going to pay for anything else, and so it doesn't make sense, neither for their pocket or for the return for the investors or anybody in the table. So understanding how they work is super important.
Right, and even for example, the accelerators, right? Sometimes they become like the first early stage investor in your company, but they look also for these huge market opportunities, right? Like if you have like a such amazing technology, such amazing team, like you mentioned on paper, and you have all these built up and such a great idea, but your market is tiny, you won't be able to access to this accelerator and their community and so on. So yeah, that's pretty interesting feedback. So for all of us, it is important to know which industry we're attacking, we're entering, how big is the market, and how we should pitch our idea to these investors to make it appealing to them. Oliver, well, it's such an impressive background that you have. I would like to back a little bit
Hi.
Uh-huh.
I just want to touch on one last point.
Right.
I think we should talk about Amazon for to understand why you need to be in a big market. Amazon is literally, e-commerce. They represent 49% of all e-commerce sales. It's massive. They're dominating. Well, they are 5% of all retail spend across the country. So if you crush it like Amazon in 2018 and you're just slam dunking it, well, you're 5% of the market. And that's what it means that you need to attack big market is because
Right.
if you're slam dunking it, you're going to take 1 to 2% of the market. That's
But it
it.
steals a lot of money, right? It steals like
Yeah,
a huge
and it's still a
revenue.
lot of money. But
Yeah.
if your market is tiny and you're winning 1 or 2%,
Then you're done. Yeah.
yeah.
Agree with you. So Oliver, I would like to know when did you decide to start your first company? Like you mentioned, all your experience that you have, but what was the main reason to do it, and what happened to that company in detail?
Sure. So I want to talk actually a little bit to two companies. I want to
Okay.
talk about the first company where I was a co-founder and a chief marketing officer, which was my very first company, and then the first company where I was a CEO. Um, and my first company was Brands Club, where I was a chief marketing officer, and everything that had to do with marketing was me. So like performance marketing, branding, doing events, doing BI, product development, like all of those different touch point. Like I had a hand in it, and the this company grew extremely fast. And what was interesting is that we had to do our own logistics because it was Brazil. There was no 3PL solution. Our person who was doing CEO was not a specialist of operation. I was 22. I had no freaking idea how to do marketing. Our head of sales was a little bit more experienced. The CEO was a little bit more experienced, but by and large, we were not like the most experienced team. But the business model immediately hit
Took
a
off.
runaway metric, and the runaway metric for us was client acquisition. Like we were acquiring clients for like nothing. We got very lucky because we were the first people to do performance marketing in a country that just didn't know what it was. And it turns out that my friend that I had like, hey man, I'm getting this job, I need to figure out what I need to do, knew about performance marketing, and we did this. A little bit lucky, but this also has to do with the timing. The country was coming out of recession very, very quickly in 2009.
Mhm.
They had a big commodity boom. They had disposable income. They loved discounts. They loved big brands. So everything kind of aligned. But immediately it started flying off the handles in a very, very good way. After this, in in my first company where I was a CEO, stark contrast is that on paper, we were a much stronger team. Like the logistical guy was amazing, still is. Like he was so good that I gave him like customer care to take care of because like he was just freaking crushing the logistic part. The person who was designing shoes had been designing shoes for the last 10 years. I had some good experience. We were doing some really fun stuff in terms of technology as well. Our branding um, probably not strong enough in terms of to build a brand as we should have, but at least in terms of recognition for a startup, it was huge. I mean, I was in the papers every other week. I was a little famous for a while. That was a lot of fun. I kind of miss it. Like it was cool. People would recognize me. That was cool. And I didn't think I'd miss it until I moved to the US, and then I was like just Joe Schmo again. I was like, fuck. Um, but besides this, the team was much more experienced. We had better investors. To be frank, we had
Okay.
like Excel and Redpoint. So really smart people. They were on the board. Like we were talking all the time. But the business model never worked. The unit economics were never there, and we had a lot of money. Like I think we started with like 6 million or $5 million from like that. That was our founding round.
It
Uh,
was like a seed round or a
no,
Series
it
A?
was founding
No?
round. It was our friends and family. Our friends
Oh,
and family
wow.
was 5 6. No, we started with this. Like we got the funding before we had a logo for the company.
Wow. That's
Uh,
amazing.
but it's because like on paper we look so strong, right?
Yeah.
But the unit economics never worked. And try as we might, it is, this is going to suck, but it's better to have a good business model with a medium team than a medium business model with a
with a
great
great
team.
team.
And because a team you can fix over time, you can hire people, etc. But if your business model doesn't work, it doesn't work. And it's very, very hard to pivot into success. It is people, talk about it, about those amazing story about how they pivot and suddenly it's successful. What you don't hear is the other 99.9% who
Uh,
just simply was not able to pivot into success. And so um, this is one of the big advice I give during mentoring, and I know it's getting a little bit all over the place, but I think this is very important, is to have clear metrics and a clear view to take back and say, okay, where do I want to be in 3 months? Where do I want to be in 6 months? Where do I want to be in 9 months? And if you don't hit those metrics by 70%, which is like typical OKR thing, like you need to think about, should I keep on doing this? Because the biggest value, the biggest thing that is valuable here is not the
sure.
investor's money, and it's not the company or the employee, is your
Your
time.
time.
And the
Yeah.
reason I'm saying this is not to be a dick, because man, investors' money, I fought tooth and nail to get back the money of my investors. Like I went to unplug the air conditioning of my office that we had to try to sell it. And like we sold everything. Like we sold the chairs, everything that was
Every,
not nailed
yeah.
to the floor. And I even tried to sell the floor because we had redone it. It was really nice. And so, is it important? Yeah, it's absolutely important. Your employees, is it important? Yes. When Choose for You closed, I went to my entire personal network. I went to all of the CVs. I made sure that all of them found a job, and actually a better paying job, and some of them like runaway success. My CFO of the time is now doing an amazing career. I'm super proud of her in Brazil. She went from she then went to Red Point, and then she went to, I think, Nubank, and I think she's on
Whoa.
I think she's on something new afterwards. Like, no, she's like just slam dunking it as the entire time. So super happy. Um, and so, is it important? Yes, it is super important. But still, the biggest value is your time,
Correct.
because you don't pay yourself well, because it's super stressful, because you're killing yourself. There is no excuse about chasing something that doesn't work. And trust me, because my last company, we closed after 5 years. We should probably have closed after 3. I
Okay.
spent literally
2 years more.
years probably flogging a dead horse. That I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I'm eternally optimistic. I'm eternally I'm relatively creative when it comes to business. I kept on thinking I'm gonna find the solution,
Correct.
but I I wasted my time, and I wasted my investors' money, and I wasted my employees' time as well, because they could go and grow somewhere where the company was growing, so they could get raised and like have a good quality of life, instead of like having somebody who's like neurotically trying to save a
To
boat
save the
that's
company.
sinking on fire.
Correct. Okay. So this actually brings me to my next question. When do you decide it's the right time to move to the next team, or when should you keep going with your company, and like to keep working on that until you get an exit or something?
Sure. So, um, I think there is 3 big learnings from my from Home 61, which was interesting, because you'd think that after 4 companies you kind of know it all, but every time it's a new problem. So that's wonderful. Keeps it fresh, I guess. But one of the big learnings was, whenever you're going to pivot or whenever you're going to try something, we're attacking the real estate market, which is very large. Like, you can do commercial, you can do loans, you can do residential, you can do rentals, and so forth. Um, at the beginning, and thankfully this is a mistake we corrected fast, is that we would try a lot of things, but we would not define well success, and we would not define well failure. And so, when we would get results over what we were trying, we couldn't tell if did it not work because we didn't give enough resources, or did it not work because it just won't work. And so, after like a few months of like, oh, we wanted to do this, we wanted to do this, and so we did it, and then we still don't know what the fucking answer is. I was like, no, if we're going to go, we're going to go one or two things per month, and we're going to go full blast into this direction. Like, even if I think it's fucking stupid, we're going to go into it. If we agree that this is the direction, we're going to go, and we're going to test full blast, and we're going to define success or failure. And if it's not success, it's failure. So that was one big learning that we adapted. The other thing is what I've mentioned is you need to have clear goals for your company and your metrics.
Okay.
If you cannot control the growth of your company, and you cannot, then you're not in control, and it just happens to be fucking miracle, like arrows and stars aligned, that you're growing, but you cannot replicate it the next months, then you're in trouble. And putting this on an OKR or timetable is one thing, but I want to here, I'm going to give it more on if you are an early stage founder and you're the CEO, so perhaps you cannot share your doubts with your junior partner
Mm.
or maybe your employees or your investors, quite frankly. You need to find somebody who is not at stake in this company that you respect, and you're going to tell him, these are the metrics for success for my company in the next 3 months, in the next 6 months, etc. Can I spend half an hour in 3 months, in 9 months, in 6 months to talk to you about them? And I'm going to tell you what are those metrics, and I'm going to tell you if we've got them. And if we didn't get them, your job is to ask me one
Why?
question, which is, should you quit?
Okay.
Should you
Okay.
quit? Because, and by the way, in my mind, if you don't hit the OKR, if you don't hit those goals 2 months in a row, it's automatic disqualification for the business model. Go do something else. Pivot, try something new, etc. But don't spend more than
More
six
time.
months. More than 6 months, like, you need to get this runaway metric. And by the way, the runaway metric is kind of like my concept is that something in your and one of our start. I read one of the comments. I got distracted. Sorry. Um, yeah, completely lost the thread. But the runaway metric is one metric in your business need to tell you that you're going to be successful. In the terms that you need to be successful is you have a massive lead acquisition, or you're in marketplace and the supply side is just acquiring, or you have your customer, your revenues are skyrocketing, or suddenly in B2B you're getting more, or in your app you get a massive amount of downloads and whatnot. Anything, at least one metric that is just telling you like this is the right direction.
Okay.
If you don't have any of them and it's just like really stale, 6 months is enough to say, okay, we need to do something
We need to move
drastically
on.
different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Correct. Yeah, that's very interesting, because sometimes you're stubborn and you want to say like, no, I'm not a failure, right? Like I need to keep going with this company. At a certain point, you will realize, like you mentioned, like you spend 2 more years on something that you should, and you start, and you, like you mentioned, you waste an opportunity of starting something new that might be better. So that's interesting.
Yep.
And I would like to touch base again with the funding part. Do you think that every funder should aim to get like these pre-seed or seed rounds as fast as possible from, let's say, like day one, in order to move faster? Or what about bootstrapping in that part?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, unless you're a second-time founder and you've had like some exits like I did, I think it might be difficult to get a seed without traction, to get traction without to get funding without traction. For the pre-seed, yeah, absolutely. Bootstrapping is a very valid strategy, particularly where the dilution compression happens very at the early stage. So what's going to happen is that your company is going to go from being valued like at 100K to 5 million or to 2 million very quickly. So if you can save as much capital in those early stages, then it's a massive dilution shield that you can then you can put for yourself. This is why very often you ask friends and family is because they're just not going to hammer you on the
Yeah,
valuation.
evaluation.
So the early stage is very much like you need to try to bootstrap and try to figure it out as much as you can. And today there's a lot of no code solution. There is a lot of really good things that can happen to test out your model. Doing A/B test over your different marketing channels and on and so forth are more than easy
Mhm.
to do. Um, Quite frankly, you should be able to test your business model with between $15,000 and $20,000. Now, that
Okay.
doesn't include the salary that you would pay yourself. So I'm just thinking like, hey, I have this idea. I'm going to go and create a no-code solution. I'm going to do a few tests. I'm going to spend a little bit of money in marketing. 15 to 20K is completely reasonable. Thank you, Shopify. Thank you, Google AdWords, and
Because it make it
go
cheaper
for it.
for us to try, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great, great, great. And now, as an investor, what is the first thing you see in a startup in order to predict that it will be successful or not? What is it? The team? Is it the market, like you mentioned? What is?
Very early stage is a team. How much do they understand? How much do they understand about their business as a business dynamics? Because the reality, look, B2B, B2C, sorry, D2C, B2C, they all have the same kind of pattern. And so once you kind of understand your how's the business work, it doesn't really matter what category you're applying to it. It's going to be very, very similar. And um, when you're looking for a team, what you're looking for is not necessarily that you're looking for the mistakes, if you will. You're
Okay.
looking for the what they don't know, and you're looking for the egregious mistakes, if you will. And if none of them are there, and they seem to have a very strong handle over their category, that's like massive thing. So, do they understand very well how's the business dynamics going to go? How is their strategy to market? Is the category very big because it needs to gives big returns? Do they understand, or do they have an unfair advantage in that market
Hmm.
because they have been there for the last 10 years, on and so forth? How is the competitive landscape as well? Also, people overvalue the competition because most startup dies from fighting with founders. They die with they die with fighting with fighters. They die from lack of money. They die for poor traction, but very rarely do they lose because of competition.
Competition, right? Yeah, yeah. And sometimes some of the founders start thinking about, okay, what are we doing different than these other
Yeah.
companies before understanding their own core.
That's at a very early stage. At a later stage,
Yeah.
it becomes much more important to understand the traction of the company. Because at the seed stage, you need to have some traction, and for that traction, then suddenly you're competing that traction versus other traction that investors are seeing. Again, big market helps, good traction, being a good founder, thing. But as a company grows,
Hmm.
the founder becomes less important because, quite frankly, everybody becomes replaceable, and the company's traction becomes more and more important.
Okay.
And so there is a clear shift, and I would say the big shift happened at the Series C, where if you're the founder or if you're CEO that has been taken in, nobody cares anymore. It's
Hmm.
just like, how is your company doing, and what are those metrics?
Okay. Correct. 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 And this leads me to a next question. Why should someone start a company? In your own words, what's the right reason to do so?
Um, I think there's a lot of reasons. I think a lot of people want to start a company because they want to be their own boss, but I think that's not a great reason because the reality is you always have a boss. I was the CEO of my companies, and my employees were my boss. If they didn't show up, like, it was a big problem. So I have to manage that. The
Right.
investor were my boss. My clients were my boss. And there was always a fucking problem to solve. And so the problem was my boss. And so there was definitely something very freeing over deciding the direction of the company. That is very freeing on the other end. It's like, okay, we might go into the wall, but if we go to the WODs because I drove it there, as opposed to be a passenger into it. So that was definitely a very good feeling. Feelings that were unexpected that I loved is that in companies that were growing very fast, Brands Club Click on a good example of this, there is something different in the air. Like everybody's thrilled. Like even in the very fucking shitty day, and there are always shitty days
Yeah.
that will happen. You're happy to be in the shitty day because it's so exciting to see like you're shaping the market, things are changing, and like those all of those closings are happening, and etc. So that's like the culture has a massive impact. And I
Okay.
fucked up venture a culture in one of my companies, and oh my god, even on the best day, it was such a drag to go there. And it was my own company,
Okay.
absolutely my fault, absolutely my fault. But still, like holy fuck, like going there on the best of day was so tough. When on the other company was a great culture, and like being in this dynamic environment where things are growing, people are hungry at every single level. It's just amazing.
That's nice.
Finish the question. I'll tell you why I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to be an entrepreneur, and I don't really care if I'm the CEO or not. What I want to do is to create something that is bigger than myself. Something that has a massive reach that improves people's life for the better. And it doesn't have to be direct. It could absolutely be indirect. It could be, for example, creating a marketplace where people are able to make a living and become micro entrepreneurs themselves. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Um, it could be, creating a new way that people are communicating and therefore are able to reconnect with their past friends, like Facebook. I think it's unbelievable. Like we wouldn't be talking to the same people now. You and I probably wouldn't be talking if Facebook didn't exist.
Yeah.
And kind of like this massive impact. And yes, of course, everything that is created might have a negative impact and positive, but I mean, such a positive trend overall. And being able to be in the driver's seat and being part of those companies that are reshaping
The
the
world.
world for the better
Right.
is what makes me just really happy to be there.
Yeah, I remember that I heard from one mentor that told me a long time ago that you should see yourself in 10 years in the same company. And if you're not able to see yourself there doing something or building something that is meaningful, you should quit and don't start that company, right? So
Yeah, I think that's a good advice. I was a little frustrated when I built shoes for you because I was like, "Fuck, my contribution is building shoes," and I didn't think that I was a. I saw the business model was interesting, and I saw the mission was um was not like it felt like a stepping stone to where I wanted to be, and I'm like, well, fuck it, I might as well just you know go where I want to be instead of building a stepping stone.
right, right. So this led me with the last question. So we then move on to the Q&A. What would be your main recommendation to a younger self? I know that this compares a lot with the question that
Sure.
we just answered, but here's what would be, you have like this opportunity to tell one thing to a younger Oliver. What would be that?
Um. So when I when I started at 22, I had virtually no money. I had built a small business before, and I had saved $72,000, and I was like super proud of it. And then I had to basically when I moved to open this new company, I wanted to invest a little bit in it, but I mean the round was already pretty big. But I put a little bit. I think from memory, I put like 14, 20, something like this, which was like huge, like we're talking like one third of my net worth was going there. And then I had to pay for 1 year of because I didn't have my papers, etc. I had to pay for 1 year of salary. I'm sorry, 1 year of rent,
Okay.
and then I had to pay for my move to Brazil. And so I was left with virtually nothing. And but like I was working, and as soon as I had like a little bit of money, I was investing all of it, all of it, all of it, all of it. I was just investing. And I was saving very, very little. I was being very aggressive with my investment because I had no money, so I had nothing to lose. I was being paid a good salary, but a good salary is very like I was paying a salary that was above my rent. Put it this
Okay,
way,
correct. Yeah.
and so I don't know. I could save 1K, 2K a year, a month, or something like this. And every time I had 5K, I would go and invest, like every time. Um, but then something happened when I had my first exit. When I had my first exit and I sold, actually I sold Brent's Club and Click on more or less at the same time, and more or less at the same valuation. One sold for 63, the other one for like 70, um, 70 million, and I had money for the first time, and I became paralyzed over what to do next. I was worried that I would lose my money. I was worried that I felt I had something to lose.
Okay.
And I started becoming a lot more shippish on my investments, and I started becoming less aggressive, and I started to play to not to lose as opposed to play to win, if you will.
Hmm.
Or it's not even play to win, but just play uh, and if I had to give myself an advice is play as if you have nothing to lose, because you really have nothing to lose. Like, once you build your career, you had an exit, people are going to employ you, people are going to help you, etc. Just stay hungry, stay aggressive the entire time. Don't don't be a pussy.
That's great. That's a good advice. So, well, we will jump to the Q&A part of this event. We have some people that here in the attendees, they help us with filling out their information, introduce themselves, also their companies. It is important for us to build this community as well. So if you saw someone in the chat that is interesting to ask, that would be great in that matter. But we have some Q&A questions here in the chat. Olivier, you're able to look to this part, right? Here in the Q&A, we have 7 questions. You're able to see.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Is it okay? Is it possible that you could read the question and then answer?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
So I have Dana Cotin. And by the way, if I, fuck up names, I'm very sorry. It's not on purpose. How are angel investors' mindset different from VC or VC firm? Do they have the same expectation of exit that you describe? And so I think there is really two types of angel investors. There is angel investors with little experience and professional angel investors. Professional investors are going to have very similar expectation as VC firms, not because they have the same requirement, because they come in so early that for them, even a small exit will mean a very big added value. But because they know that for you to get to even a small exit, at the next stage, you're not going to need the VC firm approval over their investment. And therefore, professional angel investors tends to have the same mindset, not because they have the same unit economic requirement, but because they know that at the very next stage, you're going to need the VC money. And so there is obviously some exception, like, there is a few companies that don't need VC money after the initial investment, et cetera. And most of the time, they don't. Do I have to click on answer live, Miguel, in order to answer properly? I'm sorry about that.
No, it's,
Uh,
it's okay. Yeah,
okay.
we can go to the next
All
question.
right.
Just in case
Yeah.
the attendees have any other reply to that,
Uh,
they will be able to participate.
I love the next question, so I'm very excited to answer it. There is S Reindy. Do you want me to click on answer live, or do I not have to do this?
No, you don't have to do that. Yeah,
Okay,
just
great.
yeah.
Okay, how do you combat imposter syndrome? Starting a whole new thing must be nerve-wracking. I didn't know the term imposter syndrome until recently, when I was reading actually Sheryl Sandberg's book Lean In, um, and I absolutely had imposter syndrome at my very first company, to the point that every morning that I came into the office, I thought it was my last days. They were finally going to tell me, like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing. Please leave. And and you know what? That must have been some of the time that I did my best work ever, is because I was so sure that I didn't know what the fuck I was doing, that I was maniacally overcompensating by instead of being paralyzed by fear, because that's not who I am, I instead like really acted upon it.
Mhm.
And I asked all of my friends that were in marketing, because I was in a position, how to do this and like how to review that and how to do this. And um, something were not always great. So very often people would ask me a question and I was afraid they would realize that I didn't know. So I said, I know. And then I would immediately jump on studying what I had to do. So I started getting um, so much more information and learned so much more. But I never really felt comfortable in this until years later. But it was also kind of like a great fuel to go with it. So I used it as fire, but the anxiety was there, the lack of sleep was there. But
Mhm.
also at the same time, I could tell you how many visits we had the day before and a month before, like from the top of my head, because I was just like so on point on it.
Into it. Yeah.
Um, and so it might be a little bit of personality with it, but imposter syndrome is fucking real. Is
It happens to
it's
everyone.
nerve
Yeah.
wracking and it happens to everyone. And I would say that don't sell yourself short, because particularly in a startup, nobody really knows the right answer. They just have an idea. And so you're doing the best you can with the information you have. And that's what you must do. The best you can with the information you have and the resources you have, obviously. And that's how I would combat imposter syndrome.
Great. Okay. Awesome. Awesome. So we can jump to Dana Kurin again for that question.
Sure. So for B2B SaaS businesses, do you think about what do you think about the time it takes to find product market fit and the concept of runaway proof of business model? Man, so B2B is hard. So I categorize them in really two category. One of them where you're going to have where the product can sell itself by itself, where it's just like first of all the product is probably a little bit on the cheaper side, and you don't need to have a massive sales team. So Customer IO, which is a company I invested in and is crushing it and is amazing email tool. You should absolutely use it.
Use it.
But Customer IO is a good example of this. You go on their website, you have everything. It's self-care. It's great. On the other hand, you have like companies like ERP system or Salesforce, and then suddenly you have to have this massive thing to be implemented. You need to have like account managers, salespeople on it, and so forth. And so I am personally not a big fan of the latter kind of companies, because not only do you need to create a product, you need to create a product, but also the success depends on your sales team and not just on your product.
Mhm.
But if I have to give an advice to go on the runaway metric and on the B2B SaaS business, is try to create a very narrow product. The problem is that you're going to have sunk cost immediately, because you're going to have to build the the technology. And the biggest mistake I've seen is that entrepreneurs go and try to build a technology that solves everything. But
Right.
actually, you need to have to solve one thing really well and focus on this and do that experience great, and all of the other feature won't matter. And then try to market this. And
Yeah.
if this is not marketable, then move on to
To
another
another thing.
problem that goes on and so forth. The biggest mistake you can do is try to go too horizontal. Um, and if you need to have a great market sell and just to finish, if you need to have an amazing sales team and you yourself is not an amazing salesperson, that's a problem. That's definitely a
Okay.
problem. It was a problem for my previous company, where myself, I'm not a great salesperson, or don't aspire to be a salesperson. And if the crux of your business is sales, you need to have somebody who is at CEO level, who is the eye on the ball, who is a salesperson who can scale this.
Okay. Great. 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 Okay. We can move to the next question from Heriberto. Uh, yeah. Is it more important to grow in investment or to worry about selling as much as possible with as little money as possible?
That's a tough question, and it was given by Heriberto Padilla. And I'm not going to answer it depends because I fucking hate that answer. Um, but it really depends if you're in a winner takes all kind of market. If you're in a winner takes all kind of market, you must absolutely be the guy who grows the fastest. Fuck dilution, fuck bottom line. You need to be the biggest, baddest grower because, particularly in marketplaces where
Right.
very often it's a winner takes all,
Yeah.
like number two's valuation is zero, but number one's valuation
It's all the
is
market. Yeah.
is the entire market. And so if you're in that kind of competitive firm, and which, by the way, I would not recommend for first-time founder because having more money, which like serial entrepreneur or second-time founder are able to get, particularly at the beginning, might give them such an unfair advantage at the beginning. There. Furthermore, very often when you're a VC firm, you receive very similar companies together. So it doesn't always happen, but when there is a trend, it tend to happen together, and you typically back the guy that you think is going to win, and it's typically the guy who has potentially the best team, but also that has the most traction so far. And money helps with that. To answer the other side, if on the other hand you're in a business model that requires very clear unit economics, you need to find the market product fit before you accelerate on the marketing. This is where you need to be very cautious on things. And I would say that most of the time you need to be selling as much with spending as little as possible to show the best control of your metrics and good traction and good use of funds. It really depends what kind of market of company that you are building.
Sure. Yeah, because then we see companies that raise, I don't know, like a Series D with 60 million, $100 million, and yeah, that's why you shared this with us. And we'll go with the last question that we have here from Doc Clark. Would you like to read it?
Sure, absolutely, Doc Clark. Looking for some advice or direction on to pricing model to pricing models. The question is, as we go to market with our platform, we are fine tuning our pricing model, which leads to a question. What history can you speak about driving a pricing model? We are a SaaS model, and we have a subscription fee as well as a usage fee. Well, my friend, welcome to the world of A/B testing. Now, it really depends because there is a lot of different pricing strategy. You know, putting your product into three different variable. You know, there's a freemium model. You can price yourself very high to then sell lower. There's a lot of different things. What I have used in the past that has worked fantastically well when I had an unknown product is that I suddenly launched 20 different products, which was exactly the same product, by the way. Like the backend, the service is exactly the same, but I launched 20 different products with 20 different sales, with 20 different pricing strategy, and I put some marketing on it. Now, obviously, it worked well because for me, we didn't need a sales team. Like people would just go and click on the product and receive it. The branding was fucked up over the 20. Yeah, sure. The branding didn't really make sense, etc. It didn't matter because it was a product and the pricing that we were trying to see. And through this analysis, we found that some of them had massive impact. But what was very difficult to understand is that you had to reach the elasticity to inelasticity point. Well, the inelasticity point to the elasticity point, and that was never really super clear. We tried all of the going to 99 or to try to do 98 or 0.99. We tried everything that's written in the book. We tried. Ultimately, we couldn't find a single answer. We needed to test them all. And once we were able to test them all,
okay. Olivier, I feel like we lost you. Okay, it's good now. Yeah.
That's when we're able to see some clear progress. And what was interesting is that some were clearly losing strategies, others tend to bunch up into winning strategies.
Correct. Awesome. So that's a very interesting feedback on this. I believe that we reached the hour right now, so we very much appreciate your time and all the feedback and advice, Olivier. I would like to tell all the attendees that if you're interested in reaching out to Olivier for asking more questions or sharing your pitch deck or company, please feel free to send it to us, and we will make sure that he receives it and he evaluates and decides which one to contact. Oliver, we very much appreciate your time today. We have such an amazing event, and it was great to hear your experience. And please stay tuned for our next events, and we would love to have you again soon.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to it's a pleasure to be here. Happy that I hope all of this has been helpful, and have a great day.
You too, and it was for sure. You have a good one. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye bye.
bye.